to this week's episode of the Crypto Blue Hour. I'm Eric. This is Charlie. Today we're going to go through a few topics, specifically narratives, why people are talking about AI and cryptocurrency in the same sentences. How you doing, Charlie?
Chilling, man. Things are good. It's a little, a little dreary in New York City these days, but it's all good, man. I think I'm getting ready for a road trip next month, so it's going to be interesting. Next week we'll also be in this apartment, but then we're going to do a show, I think, later in March around your birthday from maybe the same place. Like maybe we'll do it from the computers. I'm not really sure, but we'll be in the same room or at least the same area, which is kind of fun. So
logistically figuring that out will be fun. Figuring out how to shoot
yeah, seriously. What about you? How you doing? Sound great.
Yeah. Healthier now, more healthy than last week. Weather's good in Austin. It's like 75 degrees. No complaints.
Looking tan.
Yeah, lots of news and announcements happening in the crypto industry, which is always fun and keeps me busy.
Good.
Yeah, excited to be here. But let's go ahead and kick it off. First thing I have to talk about is a tweet from last week where there's a very he's a huge developer in the industry. His name's Andre Crone. He was one of the main developers of a blockchain called Phantom, but he was being asked where he thinks AI, artificial intelligence, and blockchains meet, and like how are they complementary. And one of the reasons he was asked this is because over the past 2 months, I would say, with ChatGPT going bananas, Google, there's all these AI wars. A lot of tokens have pivoted and started talking about how they'll integrate artificial intelligence into the projects. And I'll read some of what he said. So his response was blockchain equals slow by centralized standards, transparent and secure. AI equals high throughput, opaque, black box. I need to very clearly stress these two things do not mix. That's like asking, what role do you see for Coca-Cola in the construction industry? Great comparison. Blockchain and AI are not complementary, and for now, anyone that jumps on the AI bandwagon is simply doing so for pump and dump reasons. To see a project all of a sudden pivot to AI, it just means they had nothing and are dead in the water. And that's a very, very unlikely if we get to a point where blockchains could handle the kind of throughput required that a neural network needs, we might be able to see them on chain, but even then the question would be, but why? Blockchains don't improve AI, and AI doesn't improve blockchain.
Yeah. Talk about hot takes.
Yeah. Coming in high. I mean, he's always kind of been a good voice of reason in the industry because he's very tech intensive. He really likes, blockchain technology, and clearly not a fan of all these people hopping on the AI bandwagon. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. It's sort of like we've spoken about. I think that in the initial episode, I had some notes on scams. I think that scams are kind of two. I think of them as two different things. There are two categories of scams. One of them is, you somehow expose yourself to a vulnerability. You expose yourself through a lack of understanding operational security, and you have a really bad password, or you save your seed phrase in a place that's very, very, very easy for someone to get from you in some way. That's really like operational security wise. And then another type of scam is something that is sort of market driven, and projects that are scams, or what we would call rug pulls in this industry. And it's where somebody pulls the rug right out from underneath you. And so they have a fake thesis, they have a fake sort of like they're all talk, and they're no substance, and they get people to buy in because of hype. And then they ultimately pull the rug out from underneath you. And we've seen them. We've been firsthand part of them. There are many, 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 many. I think it's almost like a rite of passage, which is really sounds silly to say out loud. But almost everybody I speak to in this industry who works in this industry has. Is that? Do you think everybody's been a part of a rug pull? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's weird.
I mean, if there's responsible people out there, they definitely haven't been. But the one fun thing about operating on chain is you get access to all these projects that can launch in an instant and say all these things, or can be funny. Like I think Dogecoin is a great, or Shiba Inu are two tokens that have performed really well, both top 20 as far as market cap. But there wasn't really a full thesis behind what they were going to be. It was more a joke. Even the people who founded Doge have said it was meant to be a joke and a meme, and people just took off with that narrative, which was posting memes online and talking about how important the currency was and how it was going to change the world with literally nothing. That they had no way of doing that. They didn't have anything outlined.
It's a
So
joke, like a
yeah,
joke, literally a joke. But then people see that and they think that it's funny to perpetuate it, and then some people don't realize that it's a joke. But if enough people are in the, I think that it also like draws this fine line between memetics, like the economics of memes, or like the cultural influence that memes can have, and rug pulls. Like they're on a spectrum potentially, if you think about it, maybe. And it's interesting to think about the nuance of that, because a lot of people, like Elon tweets about Doge all the Elon Musk tweets about Dogecoin all the time, and
yeah,
he's even floated verbal. He's even said that there's potential it would be used as a currency on Twitter as a payment method. And it's just like, what are you talking about? It has an infinite supply, and so
yeah,
there is no economic reason to do that, other than sort of facilitating people who had an early stake, or early stake as in like a purchase of Dogecoin, rewarding them, which is, it just seems so weird to me. I don't know.
yeah.
It just shows how strong narratives can be.
Yeah, there's a funny thing that happens. For a while, I used to track new token listings on Ethereum because it's an interesting, it's its own ecosystem where people are constantly launching tokens. Some tokens will do well and have actual teams behind them. Some are completely decentralized launches where they're just creating something and putting it out there. But every time there's a big world event, there's this slew. There's just people who create tokens. So one of the most interesting recently was the Queen of England died. And on the day she died, that was like the Queen token would launch on Ethereum, and all these people would start buying it because it's an event. It's like a narrative event where they're like, "Oh yeah, the Queen died today. I'm gonna buy the Queen token or mint this Queen NFT," and those people just ride that narrative. It happens every time there's a big event. Every time Congress has a meeting, they I think, oh, what is there's a congressman who called it crypto. He made some sort of joke about what it was called, and people instantly started making tokens about it.
Gosh,
Yeah, which is so
it's
dumb.
crazy.
And it's part of this like underground culture where there's not a lot of users, so people kind of just have fun with stuff sometimes. And it can people will put money into it, but that's not the real use case. And I think going back to this AI thing, it makes sense that people are claiming that their projects are pivoting into AI because it's a hot button issue, or it's something that when people hear it, they're like, oh, yeah, that's really hot right now. But in reality, there's going to be no, there might be one or two projects that are actually building some sort of AI software that's maybe outside of blockchain stuff. Like what's really cool with AI is you can take things that humans do, like copywriting, building reports, coding, and you can make that more automated, easier, faster, way less friction in it. And those are cool, but those don't need blockchain tech. They don't need a immutable ledger. They need just fast moving software, and you need to be able to process like for large LLMs, like large language models. There's a lot of processing power that goes behind it, and you're not going to get that from a blockchain. So people are saying that are kind of, I agree with them, riding that train, trying to get people to
Yeah.
invest because they have the word AI in it. And I haven't really researched much of these projects at all because I don't think there's any meat there.
Yeah, I did a little bit, just because each month I mean, if you think about the community of like crypto lives in different places. So the more minute sort of like intimate conversations happen in places like Discord and Telegram, and then sort of town square is Twitter. And in the same way that there's a very active, which you might not know actually, there's a really active golf Twitter sort of sphere
Oh,
that lives in
really?
parallel, but they don't overlap really at all. And so I have a few different Twitter accounts, but one of them kind of follows both, just because it's my main account, I guess you could say. And so I get a lot of like professional golfers commenting on stuff, and then a lot of the correspondence, like Barstool Sports is a really big player in golf now, and
Yeah.
so it's really interesting. Like there's nothing to do with blockchain or anything about distributed ledger tech with golf, but there's a really active golf crypto, or I'm sorry, golf Twitter, in the same way that there's crypto Twitter. But each month there are these like bigger influencers who just have garnished a lot of followers. Usually they're some sort of whale, or they're really good researchers. It depends. There are literally thousands of these people, and they have different names for themselves for different reasons. But a lot of these people sort of like come out with their narrative theses over the course of time, like whether it's monthly or weekly, or they're constantly sort of like these guys living. I imagine them like sitting in a hoodie in like a basement and like with all these screens, just looking at charts all night. And maybe they're not. I don't know. Maybe they're just BSers. I'm sure that there are bullshitters. I don't really know. But I know that there was a big narrative last month about AI, and they were talking about, all right, these are the tokens you want. And then Andre had this interview a couple of weeks ago, or whatever it was, a week ago. And then that sort of fizzled a little bit. And now there's this new narrative that people are talking about, the China narrative. And they're saying that these tokens are the ones that you should be following. And then even ETH is going to pump because Vitalik, the founder, he only dates Chinese girls apparently. And so they're saying you got to buy ETH because he's been studying Mandarin for 2 years as well. But it's like all this really silly. It's really silly, but it's narrative driven. So like I think that I remember hearing stories from my grandfather years and years ago about the IPO of Home Depot and how exciting it was, and how there was this like interesting. He had worked on Wall Street. He had moved to the United States for a job on Wall Street, and he was very, very intimately involved in that. And so it just was very, it's there's similarities. It's like who you're having lunch with, who tells you about things. At that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, now it's more like who you follow on Twitter and what sort of things you're consuming there. It's really the narrative plays fascinating. And the AI thing just makes very little sense to me. But I wanted to also note, you had said the Queen coins and stuff. The same thing happened with SBF, with Sam Bankman-Fried, with the FTX fiasco. He had tweeted like 4 different things when this all was sort of coming to light very, very rapidly. I remember that weekend was unbelievably weird. I just sat literally here for like 4 days, and I ordered a bunch of, I don't really order out that much, but I ordered like almost all my meals and just sat here and like read everything I could about what was going on in real time on Twitter. But there were a bunch, he had sent like 4 tweets that were just one word, or sorry, maybe one letter for some of them.
Yeah.
And then those immediately were minted as tokens and they pumped, and it didn't make any sense, but it was happening in real time. And then the same thing happened today. Coinbase announced this thing, Base network which is on top of Ethereum, a roll-up called Optimism. So it's cheaper. It has transactions that are cheaper than Ethereum, but leverages their infrastructure. So Coinbase, which we've spoken about pretty much every episode, I'm sure, launched this thing today. I mean, Eric can speak more to it. I'm a little bit, Ethereum's not really my thing, as you might probably remember by now. But there's already Base tokens somewhere, and this announcement has nothing to do with a token. It's very explicit about that. But this other token that's already in existence called Base did like a 500x in an hour.
Yeah, I know, dude. Just the name of it having the same name. So yeah, for reference, like the Coinbase announcement was pretty huge for the industry. They're a centralized exchange, which means that all their transactions happen what we would call off-chain. And then if you have the option once you buy there to send the funds on-chain. So they pretty much hold everything that you say you buy, but they are now building in layer 2 blockchain, which is on top of Ethereum, utilizing this open source network called Optimism, and it's called Base. And it did say explicitly in it, though, we are not launching a token. So their gas token will be Ethereum, and that's what they're utilizing. But Base still went up a crazy amount, which I don't know how that happens. Maybe one person assumes that it'll run based off that, and then another person also assumes, and then another person, and next thing you know, you have 20,000 people all investing in a token for no reason other than an announcement that's unrelated. It's crazy.
Do you have much insight, Eric, into as a professional scammer? You probably know the answer to this. Do you have any insight into like if we were to mint a token right now, like Blue Hour or something like that, what sort of upfront cost would we have? Do you have to put in any? You must put in some money.
Yeah, there's some sort to deploy the smart contract. You're going to pay some gas fees. The cool thing with deploying or creating your own token is there's really no value attached to it until somebody creates a liquidity pool, which is when you tie. If it was, let's just say, Blue token, and we were on Ethereum, we would go to a decentralized exchange and create an LP token, which would be, if we wanted it to be the exact same price as Ethereum, which is $1,600, we would create a pool and we would put one Ethereum in and one Blue token in, and then that would create a market for it where it could start to be traded. And people would hypothetically trade on that. There's automated market AMM contracts So all of the trading can happen on chain through the smart contracts. And it would cost to deploy the smart contract to create the token, and then it would also cost to add that. I mean, the cost of Ethereum, but also the transaction cost of adding that liquidity. So you could do that. It's relatively easy, and there's software that makes it very easy to launch a token. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really cheap blue token. 16K for one blue token sounds really cheap. So
1600, yeah. And
yeah,
what a lot of people don't realize is, you want to know exactly what the tokenomics are. You could look on chain, but normally you would go to the project and they tell you, oh yeah, there's 25% reserved for the team, 25% for the community, all these things, and that's how a lot of people, that's why it's lucrative. People can create this hype around a token or use a narrative, and then they can keep a bunch of tokens for themselves. And then hypothetically, in a few months, if the token's performing well because they're pumping it, they can use a network of influencers. They can do a lot of things. They can claim that they're creating an AI software. And then when the token
exactly.
has enough liquidity and enough people have bought it and the price goes up, they start selling it. So that's a pretty classic scam way to make a quick buck within a year. And then,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and you can abandon your project and, head for the hills.
I think that the longer that we've been here, the more you see trends in different scams. There was the Ohm trend about a little bit less, maybe about a year ago, and that was about. I don't even want to get into it. It's a long story, but there are a lot of these trends you see that are very popular that then ultimately become crash and burns because they're pretty much Ponzi-nomics.
Yeah.
It's a good way to say it, but they're different
Ponzi.
takes on how to do it.
Yeah, you just create something that gets a lot of hype, but only does well when more people are buying into it, which is the way most assets are. But generally, over a longer time frame, if you make a bet, like we both believe Bitcoin is awesome tech, and if you are not just making one huge buy with 100% of your net worth into it, and you create a plan and you averagely, like it's called cost averaging, but you buy a set amount over a certain amount of time, when you want to take money out, or if you want to hold it for 5 years, that's your game plan. Like that's a good strategy. But when you see these narratives and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a 500% gain in a month, that's a good sign that it's a narrative, and also that your strategy is probably not a sustainable one. that's a that's a good way to lose 99% of what you put in.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting though because there's also another spectrum here where we're talking. It's interesting because good tech, speaking to really intelligent builders, which I'm not. I've made a career of working with really smart engineers and builders on the internet who have products and have built products and have product visions, and I help them to articulate that to lay people who maybe don't really know it or aren't aware of it. So that's kind of like the niche I've found so far in my career, or most. That's kind of like the thing I've done most of my time professionally, and when it comes to speaking to builders in this space, it's really interesting because a lot of the time the best tech doesn't win, the narratives win. And the narratives win because the town square for crypto is Twitter. And so Twitter has its own algorithm, which is very famously sort of like being refinagled right now by Elon's team and stuff like that. But that aside, that is still the town square. And these sorts of platforms like Twitter, social platforms like that, which are inherently allow for anonymity. They allow for people to not have to take responsibility for what it is that they say sometimes, or to varying levels. I think that it's just something that's very, very consistent, is that narratives are technology is one variable that's very important when it comes to projects, but narratives are maybe not equally important, but very important. They're certainly more than 35% of the value of things, right? If you have a really strong narrative, it can lift a project. Does that mean that I'm sitting and looking for those? No, I think that it's not a good way to invest, because that you have to be such an active day trader, and you have to be you also have to really have like an interesting moral. It's very opaque from a moral perspective, if you ask me, because there are people who are buying, and literally this is a double-sided marketplace. Just because you can't see them on the other side of the computer screen, there is somebody else who's buying when you're selling. That's the way that these markets work.
Yeah.
It's decentralized in that way. So there's not an intermediary. You're doing it through smart contracts. So you're dumping on somebody else. So I don't know. I think that morally it's a little reprehensible, but I don't mean to pass judgment.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some. I've always felt weird too because on a blockchain, if you make money, if you're in early on something, you make money on it, and then you sell into other people's buys, it feels weird. But if if you're in it for the right reasons and you do want to be rewarded for what you do, it's something I think creating some sort of moral code for yourself is important because you don't want to be. It can be very much a dog eat dog world out there and
It's
people
true.
can get jaded very quickly. But
It's true.
I think people who are literally just trying to buy in the first 10 minutes of that base token going up so that they can dump 60 minutes later, like yeah, that's a sketchy thing. You
Yeah.
probably shouldn't do. It's not a great way. I don't know. It's tough to look in the mirror, I think, after doing something like that. But
Yeah. Exactly.
studying projects you like and learning and leveraging in and going with an investment strategy is kind of how I do it, which I like.
Yeah.
And I've been playing around with ideas. I actually looked last week on CoinGecko, just trying to find projects that interest me that aren't in the same vein as like an AI or a narrative, something that I think's interesting. I was looking through. There's like travel companies that have tokens. It didn't bear any fruit when I was researching them, but people trying to build platforms where you can get rewarded. I know there's a huge industry of like travel airline miles when you use credit cards and stuff like that. It's already kinds of exists, but people are trying to bring that on chain, which is interesting. And I was looking at projects that are like related to actual products in Web3, like wallets that have tokens. They actually provide a service where they have a wallet on chain and things like that. Payment, anybody who's working on payment solutions, stuff like that. So I think if you're somebody's interested in this space and you don't know where to look, starting to research and see, there's not a crazy amount of different ways you can go or directions you can go right now. A lot of times it's just infrastructure, whether it's file storage or actual gas tokens, like you would find
Hmm.
that's what Ethereum is, or governance tokens. But that research has been interesting to me, and I'll keep doing it. And if I find anything super interesting, I'll bring it to the table.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that there's always interesting stuff because where there are builders, there are ideas, and where there are ideas, there are things that are interesting, right? So I think that, yeah, I think that's awesome. I don't spend so much time, digging into those things. This is it's super speculative, right? But
Yeah,
it's a fun use of time, especially if I know that, for example, you had mentioned it in an earlier episode, but I know that you're a huge fan of Creco, and Creco is something that is an NFT project, Crocodiles, and that's an
yeah,
NFT project, but it's something that you were really early in because you were literally just interested in it in their Discord, doing scavenger hunts and things like that, and earning. And so as a result, you've gotten a ton of these things. And if you
yeah,
sell one or two and you have 40 of them, like that's not what I mean when I say like the base token thing from earlier today,
yeah.
at all, because that's something that like you care about, you understand the utility of, and it's something that if you want it, that's you. If people want it, that's absolutely fine. People are bidding on the items that you literally have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's but that's really interesting. I didn't know you were looking into those things. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
Some interesting stuff you can go.
yeah. When markets are like this, it's tough because you get pretty demoralized with just the fact that the economy's crap. There's so many things going on around the world that it's not the most exciting time to invest. But I'm starting to feel the bug where it's fun to research projects and see, and also just think of things that I would like to build and then see who's building that. I'm into media stuff. I mean, we're clearly into media stuff. We're making a podcast and a YouTube channel, but people are doing that for this industry is really cool to me. It feels still very early. Um,
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what people build and what you and I build.
for sure. I think also, I guess that's interesting because I think I do a lot of research into infrastructure stuff like communications, like blog platforms. Like I looked at Mirror for a long time. I looked at Lens for a long time. I think that these are really interesting. I don't know that they're really solving anything that particular. I really like Arweave as a technology, but that's more of a network. And each time I
Yeah,
kind of get into these rabbit holes where I'm looking at actual dApps or decentralized applications being built on top of networks, I usually find myself like much more interested in the network infrastructure side of it, because that's what's differentiated between Ethereum and Bitcoin and then all of these other options, whether it's Avalanche, Hedera, Phantom. There's so many. And I think that the big thing for me is understanding, why are these people building on this network instead of that network? And I just find that question very, very interesting. So,
yeah,
and oftentimes it's like because Bob knows Jim from college. Like it's really simple things usually. But yeah, it's interesting. So I do a lot of research as well, but mostly on the network level is what I found.
Yeah, that's a good place to go too. Cool,
Yeah,
man.
it's interesting.
All right,
Sweet.
let's get it. You want to get into some hot takes for the week?
That's it, man. Yeah, let's keep this one less than 30. Yeah, you go first, please.
All right. So my official hot take of the week is on if you're an iPhone user, which I know most people are, you can turn off color filters on your phone, and so it pretty much makes your entire screen grayscale, and it brings my amount of time that I'm willing to spend on the phone because I'm somebody who has Twitter, like the YouTube app on there, and it's very easy to scroll. And the way that the color, there's just something with how vivid it is that it's very hard to get off of it. But if you go to accessibility, display and text, and color filters, you can turn off the color of your phone, and it makes it hard to use your phone for more than 5 to 10 minutes. And I've really enjoyed that. It's cut down on my screen time a lot, and reading more, doing more stuff, and you don't feel that like dopamine drain where you have to go, you're like, I gotta pick up my phone and look at it because it looks like a 1920s movie.
That's awesome. I haven't done that in a long time. I did that on my old phone, but I should probably rip that out on this one. I'm pretty good about not touching my phone for hours at a time. But man, my hot take is a tough one. I didn't really prepare anything this week. I think I have a hot take that I was thinking about while I was doing the dishes earlier, is that although not everybody's so open to it, I see you laughing. I'm not gonna say what you think I'm gonna say. I don't think, but although this might not be such a popular opinion, I think that doing road trips and being uncomfortable is really, really, really good. Like I'm going on a road trip for about a month, like 35 days next month. And I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to visit Eric. I'm going to be in LA for a conference. I'm going to be Austin, Chicago, Denver, Utah, a whole bunch of different places. And I've had some fun road trip stories. I've been scammed in real life, been rug pulled by somebody who pretended to be stranded once, that I gave them some money, and they traded me for some. I didn't even want their jewelry; they gave it to me anyway, and it ended up being fake. But that's a whole longer story. But I've had a whole bunch of stories of like meeting random people. Most of them are very positive, and I'm a grown man who can protect myself, and so it's not necessarily advice for everybody. But I've traveled quite a bit. I did a lot of hitchhiking across the continent of sub-Saharan Africa, at least. So I'm very comfortable sort of being uncomfortable, but I do think I'm like a little bit nervous. There's a part of me that's nervous, but there's also a big part of me that's really looking forward to it, because you always learn something. You always kind of, you feel lonely, you feel excited, you feel, there's all sorts of things you feel, and it's fun. I think I'd encourage people to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've done some road trips too by myself, and I feel like I've never appreciated a conversation with somebody more than after driving all day by yourself.
True.
Like, holy crap, I will talk to anybody right now.
Even just the lady behind the counter at a hotel. It's like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Like, hey, darling. It's, oh gosh, I'm so happy to see you. They're like 550 pounds. It's like, no one's ever looked so pretty than me. Yeah, it's very close.
That's a good hot take, man. I like it.
We've also done some road trips together. Shout out to good road trip partners, which I don't have this time, but
yeah.
So funny. Like, so I've got some funny photos of Eric fast asleep in the passenger seat. Love it.
Yeah, I'm a sleeper, man.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. Me too. Awesome. Cool. Let's give a shout out to Noah. Josiah. Oh no, sorry. I thought I had it right. Josiah. Yeah, it's 2 weeks in a row. I won't do it again.
Our podcast music, Josiah Soren, Lo-Fi Leopards on Avalanche. Use case for crypto right there.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Josiah. We appreciate it, man. Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Ciao. Talk to you next week.